All right, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Gray Matters podcast. Glenn Revell, Tim Kettenring. We are joined today by Dr. Jordan Daniel, our first guest on the pod. Congratulations, Jordan. Glad to have you with us, man.
Well, I'm glad you invited me. I think you're setting the bar incredibly low, and it can only go higher from here for guests.
Okay, yes, I love that. So, quick little background on Jordan. Jordan is currently a fully tenured professor at Angelo State University. He is the 2020. I'm literally looking this up right now. You won the Alumni Association 2020 Outstanding Faculty Achievement Award from Angelo State University. And then you are also an outstanding young alumni from Hardin Simmons University as of 2023, I believe, 2023, 2024. Something in there. Jordan is also a Guinness Book of World Records holder for the Zercher squat. Tim and Jordan, you guys are both second team all conference American Southwest Conference football players. Congratulations on that outstanding achievement. We cannot relate. I was first team all conference, but that is neither here nor there. You guys are both more intelligent than me and better looking. So, but no, Jordan is someone that him and I played college football together. He was one of my professors in grad school. I was a GA for him, and then professionally and personally, we just kind of kept up with each other. So we wanted to bring him on this podcast because he has some literal and he has both theoretical and practical expertise on what we're talking about today. So that is it. And I'm going to let Tim jump in and tell you a little bit about what we're actually talking about. And this stemmed from, if you guys are not subscribed to Tim's newsletter, he's got a good one. But this came from one of Tim's newsletters about kind of how to cultivate ownership in your athletes and individuals that you work with, that you coach, that work underneath you. So we're going to get into a little bit this week and kind of hopefully give y'all some actionable tips on how you can do this in your work life, in your personal life, in your professional life, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, kind of overselling the newsletter there, but appreciate Jordan for being here. But what we're going to talk about today is called self-determination theory, and self-determination theory. There's a good bit of evidence that's been or research that's been done in the last 15 to 20 years on how to cultivate resilience and like mental toughness in young people, in student athletes, in tactical populations, using this framework of three qualities, and it's autonomy, relatedness, and competence. And so what Jordan's going to kind of talk about today is, nuts and bolts of what that looks like in your coaching practice or in your leadership or in your own personal development, so that mental toughness is it's a popular topic to kind of circle around on social media by people who don't really understand that it's not a physical quality.
Mm.
And so we're going to try to dispel some of those myths, and then Jordan's going to give us some really good takeaways. So excited to hear kind of what he has to say on the topic.
No pressure. Jordan's bringing the takeaways today.
None whatsoever.
Yeah, so just in general, self-determination theory is just a personal favorite of mine. Ryan and DC pioneered it, and it's really fun to look back at the history of how it came to be because when psychologists are looking at like the theories of motivation, like Maslow was incredibly popular up until Ryan and DC came up with self-determination theory, and I think the world has fallen in love with it, but in that parasocial way, you know how like some people can look at celebrities or professional athletes and know everything about their life but not understand them.
Mm-hmm.
Like that happens a lot with self-determination theory. People like, oh, I've read about it, and they read a blurb about it and they think that that's understanding it, and it's so much more complex because everything that we talk about today is super easy for us to chat about. It's the doing of it that's hard because it takes long-term intentionality. So self-determination theory, you mentioned the three aspects of it, the competency, autonomy, and relatedness. It's the three spokes of like a stool, a tripod. You miss one, you're going to fall over. So it's really easy for coaches to fall into the trap of only using that extrinsic motivation, because we get it. You gotta get wins today. But there is a way that you can invest in your people. And so what I'm bringing today is the use of the logic model to apply self-determination theory in coaching. So a logic model it's a visual representation of how you build a program, or like, so I'll give you an example. I teach it in my youth development class at Angela State. And so, like, hey, if we're building a youth development program that we're wanting to grow kids in a certain way, and we show somebody here are the inputs, the activities, the outputs, and the ultimate outcomes, and we lay it out versus we have a youth facility that's just like, hey, we have some basketball hoops and some balls, and so we have to show where our money is going, what it's doing, and the return on investment that we get out of people. So for the logic model, I love using it with the self-determination theory because it's the logical thought process. So when we're working with self-determination theory, it's it's easy to talk, difficult to do. And so when we talk about the competence, this is, I think, what a lot of coaches can get right very easily, teaching the X's and O's, teaching in the weight room, the hey, how do we usually because it's physical competence, that
Right.
physical literacy. But what about mental competency?
Mm,
Like, yeah, the kid knows exactly the play, but how do they respond in a high pressure game?
hmm
In a certain situation? Are we preparing kids or student athletes to do specifically that? And if you're not doing that, if you're not trying to give opportunities for people to grow those things, then they don't happen. And it's like if you've never squatted 500 pounds, I think you just put 500 on the bar, it's not going to move just because you think it will. There's a there's years and years of dedication, planning, nutrition, sleep, everything that goes into it to be able to make this thing happen. So it's a it's something that I don't think is very difficult for us to understand that self-determination is a long game. Because when we look in psychology, the more that we use extrinsic motivators with our athletes, it actually takes away from their ability to become intrinsically motivated because intrinsic motivation is super powerful long term, but it
hmm
takes time to grow. Extrinsic motivation is super powerful short term, but it only works as long as your thumb is on the scale.
mm.
It's like as me and Glenn have been, well, he's skinny now, but we've been fat bodies. When we get in trouble, the punishment was run. Well, what happens when the O line coach isn't facing us anymore? We're on the other side of the field. We slow down a little bit. Just make sure those elbows and shoulders are pumping, and it's going to look like a run because we're not very athletic or fast to begin with. So it's just like he's there. He's giving it a good old college try. So when we are working with that motivation, we have to understand that if you want to be a micromanaging coach, use only extrinsic motivators.
Mm.
The second you turn your back, they're done. They're not going to be doing it because extrinsic motivation largely works on compliance. I'm wanting you to do X, if not Y, like the letter Y, like in the equation. So
As opposed to autonomy.
yes, and so how do we build all these things? And so I was honestly, Tim, I was reading your newsletter about self-determination theory, and it inspired me I sent Glenn and you like, hey, this is my thoughts on how to use another part of self-determination theory in the vein of what Tim was talking about. So that's kind of like a broad overview, but I would love to answer kind of more specific questions.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about more, like a little bit more about logic models, just in general.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a visual written tool that shows how a program plan or like a behavior is expected to lead to
Mm,
specific outcomes. So you're not only tracking like resources, but opportunities. So, like, give an example. If you have um, a, just because I taught about it today, it's fresh on my mind. A homework assistance program after school. Okay, what do you need to accomplish that? So in like the box of inputs, it is the program, like the programming of people to help with the thing, and then the education of the people so that they can help teach. And then it leads to the homework getting done because you have a program and the people to run it, and then you just put kids through it. So the logic model is a way for us to visually represent our thought process in a logical way. So so we start with the inputs, but what we really want to do is go to the outcomes and impacts, and we start with the end in mind. Like, where do we want to end up, and and then we work backwards. Because
Nice.
if you work from the bottom up, if you start with, well, here's what we have, and they're like, well, we build on top of it, you don't have a master building plan. So,
Right.
like, you're
You
building
don't
a
know where you're
house.
going.
Correct, right? And so you don't know where you're going, you don't know what the end result looks like. Well, then how can you be expected to get there if you don't know where the destination is? And I love Simon Sinek's talk about that, that so much of humanity focuses on the route and not the destination. We're like, I think he was like, he came out of his house and he saw a neighbor packing up. He was like, well, where are you going? He's like, on vacation. But where are you going? And the neighbor just says, I'm going on vacation. He's like, where is the vacation at? And he's like, oh, okay, then we got to the outcome, the
Right.
destination. He's like, well, how are you getting there? And he's like, oh, well, I'm taking I-95. Like everybody can work on the route of the, but not many people are focusing on the destination. So focusing with the logic model lets you logically track those long-term outcomes that you're wanting to do and work backwards from there.
So, with that in mind, like thinking about reverse engineering things from outcomes, a lot of the conversations in coaching largely thanks to like the popularization of Nick Saban's trust the process kind of mantra. A lot of people try to parrot that mantra, but they are still very outcome oriented without any real process orientation. So like how would like a logic model focusing on the outcome but then developing the process from that, like how do you marry the two?
Ooh, that's a great question. And shout out, love that Nick Saban promotes that. Like, it would have taken somebody who was at the top, that successful, to preach that, for
Right.
that message to take root. So you're asking, how do you focus on the process? And I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly.
How do you kind of equally emphasize process and outcome as you're developing these logic models so that your athletes don't get so focused on the outcome that they lose sight of what they're doing to get there or what you're putting in front of them to get there?
Yeah, so if I'm hearing you correctly, how do you, when you marry those two, and understand that like when I'm talking about outcomes, I'm not talking like the ultimate outcome being we win a national title. I
Okay.
think that that pales in comparison to what we really should be after is that, I know a lot of people are listening to that or will be listening to this that are coaches, but like who are sports for? They're for everybody. And
Mm,
we can use this as not just a model of coaching for the elite levels, but modeling coaching for everybody that will ever coach.
mm,
Most people who coach don't get paid for it. You think about the amount of people who are just, they're accountant, they're a lawyer, they own a tire shop, and they coach their son's little league team.
right.
Those are coaches. They may not have the education in it, but they're doing the job. And so, how do we create tools for other people to use so they have more tools in your tool belt? So, like the ultimate outcome for me is how do we make professional human beings?
Mm,
And so, like professional human beings that are motivated, that are kind, that are courteous, and like embody a lot of the values that we say come from sports. But if we pick up a football, we don't hold the football and feel more leadership.
mm.
We don't pick up a baseball and feel more trust and respect for our teammates. So
Speak
when
for
we're talking
yourself.
about these, fair enough. Hey man, they're going to respect you if you can throw some heat at them. So I guess you're right.
You,
But
I
when
can throw some
like
heat and just don't know where it's going.
fair enough. All right,
Sorry,
I'm
go
an
ahead.
easy target too because I'm not going to be moving around much. You might need to cut that out. So, but when we're looking at it, I'm sorry, I got distracted on that. I laughed too hard. Um, that there's nothing inherent to the physical sport that is tied to the values.
Oof.
Values only exist in sport as long as the people doing them inject them into sport. And so when we're looking at the outcomes and how we use that logic model, it will be people's first reaction. They're like, you just talked about being process oriented, yet now you're talking about outcomes. The outcomes I'm speaking about aren't a win and loss record. It
Mm,
is a how do we make better people for society and humanity that can lead other people? And so I would say more of like a proximal win.
mm,
Winning might be okay to have as one of your things, but it can't be the end goal and it can't be the biggest goal because there's too many people that have used the win at all cost mindset to do horrible things to people. I mean, we've all played at differing levels of sports, so we people can understand because most people have had incidents with coaching that they would call that are not great experiences. Not that someone was difficult and hard on them. I think most athletes will respond like if someone's fair, but they're hard on you, you can respect it. It's that the unfairness, the targeting, the when you get just dog cussed at by
mm,
somebody just because like you weren't doing a physical activity well enough
mm,
because the just be more athletic. I've been told that my entire life. It has never helped me be more athletic. So
yeah.
how do we marry the two together? Is that first it's about intentionality from moment one. The second you agree in your brain to take this journey in self-determination theory, you are playing the long game and it's like getting a 30-year mortgage. It's the payoff is down the road, not right now.
Yeah.
And so
And
intentionality, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I can see how, like, first of all, identifying values and then implementing those values, like, that's the process. And then as the athletes really start to trust what those values mean in their lives, in sport, in their relationships with each other and coaches, that's what leads to whatever the outcome is that you've already kind of like pre-identified.
Yeah, and this is one of my favorite. This is a quote directly from Glenn Revell. What you permit, you promote. And I have taken that and I use that in my classes when like I'm teaching essentials of coaching about like, hey, how we do everything matters. And sometimes students understand, sometimes they don't, but it's a process. Not everybody's going to get it on day one, just like those new coaches, the first year coaching, they want to be successful. They want to hitch their wagon to a star. They want to get a district title, a state title, a national championship. But how we get there matters as much that we got there. And also, who can remember 10 years ago who won a state title in 3A football? Those are not the things that last forever.
That makes a ton of sense. Talk to us a little bit about, like, I'm particularly interested, especially like in behavior change, and how, where that fits into this process.
Yeah, so I would say that it would fit in like behavior modification is more like in the activities
Mm-hmm.
portion of it. So you have inputs, what's going into it, the activities for growth, and then the outputs. Then you come to the outcomes and like long-term stuff. So the activities is like when the like reinforcement of behavior is that you've got to be intentional with the small stuff. If you watch an athlete, if you have told them you touch the line, they don't touch the line. They see them not touching the line, and you say nothing about it. Well, then you just harmed the activity and the values that you're trying to get out of them. So, like, you want them to be able to push themselves to do the right thing no matter what. And if the right thing has been designated as touching the line, well, for athletes that may not, well, what does it matter the 6 inches that I didn't give in a sprint? probably over the term of a career, it doesn't really matter those 6 inches in terms of physicality, but it makes a big difference in the mental aspect of the sport. So I would say the what will we do, the activities is the behavior modification. There's so much fun, the science of it, of behavior modification. What we usually see in the real world is that most people's experience is somewhere between 80 and 70% negative feedback, and then
Mm,
20 to 30% positive feedback. For
wow.
positive psychology and the best performance of how we get people to do their best is actually we need to swap them. We need to
Flip
swap
those,
them
yeah.
out. We need to flip them, and we need to catch people doing good. We
Yeah.
need to, like, if we're talking about the totality of everybody, a person's actions, and if we have, let me get a,
Yeah, and
I
I'll
like to
just add,
start.
I'll add one thing is that like there are two things that I'm horrible at, and one is time zones, and the other one is behavioral quadrants. So I'm really glad that you're going into this because I think you're gonna make it make sense for me finally.
So like, so I know for this, like you have the circle of this is the totality of a person's actions in a day. So for positive reinforcement, what we do is that we say, "Ooh, we really like that little part that you did well." People will do it more. And
Mm-hmm.
then for that little triangle in there, they're like, "Oh, this is." I know this is a visual representation in a audio medium, so this may not work well. But like the negative reinforcement is like, "We don't like that you didn't touch the line. Let's remove that behavior." So what most coaches do is that they continually do negative reinforcement, and
Mm-hmm.
they eventually get down to a level of expectation of behavior that is acceptable for them. They don't do anything wrong. They don't do anything really great, but they don't do anything negatively
Mm,
that's going to hurt us. Well, what about if when we're taking away, now don't take that as I'm saying that we should not negatively reinforce. You got to sometimes. It's
mm-hmm.
just part of the game. It's part of sports. But how much intentionality are we giving to, hey, I like that you put in extra effort and letting people see and know that you know we want that of our athletes because if perfect world if we got to recruit our athletes, which type of athletes do we want, intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated? Every single person, if I could make it in my classrooms, I would want to be intrinsically motivated, but that's just not the nature of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people that are going to be fully formed and they're already bringing that to me, so I don't have to really coach them. But what about everybody else that you got to coach and it's a little harder? Well, that's when the real work comes in like behavioral modification, how we get people to change behavior. It's as much, it should be as much we're doing the positive side of it, adding to the behaviors, not only taking away. Because if you've given them, say, hey, don't do that, but you haven't given them a replacement behavior, then it's akin to telling someone to be more athletic. They don't know the
Yeah,
mechanism by which to reach that goal.
right.
I like that. I might have talked about this. I talk about this every time I keynote. I don't know if I did it on this podcast yet, but oddly enough, or appropriately enough, when I was in grad school at Angelo State, I read a book by Brian Kane. He's a sports psychologist, and he has a bunch of them. But it's basically called The Mental Game of Insert Sport here, right? Football, baseball, basketball, whatever. And I read this book. God, I'm old, dude. Like 10 years ago. But the number one thing I remember is that he said the number one thing an athlete wants to hear is their name attached to a specific compliment. And when what you basically just said, and when I say that to people in a business setting, in a military setting, like their mind explodes. Because then what you do, and you just spoke about this, is like you gift them that empowering characteristic and they internalize it. And Jordan realizes I am the guy that puts forth excellent effort regardless of what I perceive the outcome to be. And now that becomes a part of your like that becomes like the best part of you, the things I want to see you do more. I gift that to you, and now you associate it with yourself, and you just do it repeatedly. To your point, right, of like building that circle instead of taking it away. So I say that a lot because it's super impactful and it's easy. It's easy to remember, and we've kind of been. This has been the theme of like the conversation we've been having so far is simple, not easy, right? Like it's a
Mm-hmm.
simple thing to do, but a lot of times, especially in society now, what we don't do is like give people their flowers when they're around. Like we wait till they leave the program to talk about how good of a leader they were, or
Right.
whenever they're not in our life anymore. Like, man, do it when they're in front of you and do it in front of their peers because it's going to be way more powerful.
Right, and it's that's especially if it's a physical quality, right? They do something right physically or technically, tactically, whatever, and then you bring in that positive reinforcement. Now you're adding mental competence to their physical competence, which then enhances both.
100%. And you get people to that level where they know that you believe in them and that Glenn, you said like you give them their flowers, then those people will fight even harder culturally, like in your team, to police other members. And like when student athletes take care of those things all on their own, man, some really cool things can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, the other thing you were talking about, we were using the whole 6 inches demonstration. When I was in the weight room consistently, I used this like a timer, an audible timing system, and there were two settings on it. One of them had a 3 second countdown before the whistle would blow to end the activity, and the other one didn't. And so a lot of times, so what I would notice was to your point about like if we're not touching the line, we're not doing the thing. If we were doing an activity for a certain amount of time, I could generally tell how successful we as a team were going to be by how many people when they heard that first, because it would be like that first little beep saying they had 3 seconds left, like how many people just like relaxed or let down or stopped moving versus like if they went all the way through the actual whistle, I was like, oh, okay, like we have a little bit of stick to itiveness. You know what I mean? Like just because there's 3 seconds left doesn't like I'm almost done with the work. I'm gonna stop now. No, you have to get all the way to the whistle. So it was really when I would point that out to the sport coaches I worked with, like then they would cue in and really notice, and they'd be like, actually, it makes sense that athlete X usually stops when that 3 second timer goes off. That's kind of what I noticed about them on the field. Or as they changed and became more mature and more bought in, and it just became a thing they would say to each other if they caught it, to your point, policing each other. If they caught each other kind of slacking, they'd be like, hey man, quit being a 3 second guy. And that just meant they were like stopping before the work was done. So it's interesting how you could give them like once they kind of get, and that was cueing, right? Like I gave them an audible cue they could hear, and then they started internalizing it and associating it with the things we wanted them to do on and off the field. So to your point, like that was cool. I'm glad you brought that up because there's many ways that you can instill that kind of reaction and like give them, to your point about making better people, right, and members of society. Like really, you're just kind of giving them that awareness of like, oh, this is what they're actually talking about.
Yeah, and so I love that you brought up autonomy because autonomy, I think, is one of the most difficult things to do because so much of the sport is you're telling people what they have to do. And so finding those moments of where they can own part of the decision-making process, it's incredibly powerful. So like for all the areas of self-determination theory, it's like I tell my students, it's like catching butterflies. So a few summers ago, me and my daughters were catching butterflies, and my middle daughter is a straight up savage. And so like when she went to go catch monarch butterflies, what did she I caught it, Dad. And I'm like, open your hand very slowly. I got to wipe that off your hand now.
Yeah.
And she goes, what happened to it? She opened her hand. She goes, oh, look, it's sleeping. It's taking a nap. Like, yeah, it's taking a nap. So like self-determination theory is like catching butterflies. The harder you grasp at it, the harder you try to make somebody do it, you kill it. It can't happen then. It is
Mm.
like, well, what do you need? Well, what about if we put some honey out and we have a butterfly net and it doesn't crush the wings? And then it's about the self-determination theory. The three aspects is we can only provide opportunities for people to engage in them.
Yep.
Whether or not they take it upon themselves to do it and do it in the right mindset to grow those aspects of competency, autonomy, and relatedness, it's 100% on them because the second we come in and dictate, now we've made it extrinsic, which is not entirely bad because sometimes you gotta do hard things and so if you're looking at like the continuum of motivation, there's a motivation, extrinsic, and then intrinsic. In the bands of extrinsic motivation, we can move people from low level extrinsic motivation to get to like interjected regulation, where they may do something because you explain the value of doing something, but they're not quite, they don't do it just to do it, that because they find joy in it for like intrinsic motivation. Like, Tim, did you brush your teeth this morning?
No.
Okay, so like most people though, if they brush their teeth in the morning, I ask them like, did you wake up just excited and run to the bathroom to brush your teeth? No, like no, it's 2 minutes out of my day. I don't find it particularly fun or not, like there's nothing about it this is like this is amazing. Maybe if they had nicotine toothpaste, that would get it. But it it is all about how do we provide the opportunity, because the interjected regulation is that I do it because I see the value in doing of it, even though I may not want to do it. So that would be the farthest edge of extrinsic motivation that we can get a person to. But the jump to intrinsic, man, that's got to be all on them.
I like the idea of Zen infused toothpaste. So business opportunity one,
I'm
and then
telling you, if they just do a Diet Coke flavored Zen,
you brought up the toothbrushing example because when I work with the Coast Guard, part of the stuff that we do is we take them through like, hey, here's a generic 5 minute dynamic warm up as a unit you should do regardless of any time you do anything, whether it's PT, whether it's before you get on a boat, whether it's before you play basketball. And we run them through it, and they're kind of like, all right, this is stupid. Like, I'm not going to before we go, like, before we get on a boat. And the example we use is you don't brush your teeth every day so you don't get a calorie tomorrow. You brush your teeth every day so 20 years from now you don't have cavities. And the
yeah,
idea is just right, like you're just constantly laying down some kind of a good habit and doing some kind of preventative maintenance because whether you know it or not, down the line, the little small thing you did, like brushing your teeth, is helping you out in the long term. So that's how we help draw that correlation for them. And when you look at blue collar jobs or jobs in the energy sector or things like that, like you'll see I was at an energy company and we were stuffing boxes for Secret Santa, and it was a bunch of white collar people in suits and ties, and we came into the conference room, and the safety manager led them through a modified dynamic warm up because safety was part of their culture and getting physically ready to do an activity, whether it was like I'm pulling lines on a giant power line outside or I'm stuffing boxes from the C suite to the lowest person on the crew, like everyone's going to do it. So it was funny to watch people in a suit and tie like do a dynamic warm up to stuff boxes for a Christmas project. But I was like, that's the point, right? Like that's the underlying reason they do it.
Um, so take us through like how you would put together a logic model for like a sport coach and what that would look like in practice.
yeah. Okay, so let me go through my notes. It's sorry, apologies. So I made an example for a track and field coach that wants to improve athlete motivation and reduce mid-season burnout. Like this, so we're in the fall at ASU. We have all the fall sports going. We're in the 12th week of the semester, so burnout is incredibly high. People are physically stressed, mentally tired. And so, like, how can we put together a logic model in that specific explanation to help athletes and help coaches? So, starting with the long-term outcome, the better people, intermediate outcomes, like improved self-driven efforts and reduced complaint of fatigue would be something that I would want to be after, like, but when people are burnt out mentally and physically, like we've got to back off. That is not the time to like, hey, we need more mental toughness, so let's run. If running were the metric by which we develop mental toughness, then cross country runners would where we would recruit all of our special forces.
Which
But that's
ironically enough, like there are a lot of like former endurance athletes, swimmers,
yeah,
middle distance runners who end up like they are usually the most successful in selection programs across all of the armed forces.
yeah. So that might be a little more of selection bias about like the people that make it, just because they're just mentally tougher, that
Yeah.
they will handle those things longer. But when we're but if if we were wanting to make all teams and all organizations more mentally tough, not everybody responds in that
Right.
manner
Yeah,
to
that makes
that
sense.
specific stimuli. So when we're working with building that logic model, I'll go back to talking specifically. I think it's more helpful to talk about the inputs, activities, and outputs.
Okay.
So like because those are the things that we do that we can do and have a control over. You never know if you're going to reach that outcome. That is the goal, but you never know if you're going to reach there. So like for outputs, more athletes input practice design. So they're um, like, what do we want out of people to have more ownership of their program? And so that we're getting feedback from what athletes enjoy, what they don't like, what they do like, a lot of things that you can add in that don't really hamper training protocols or training rate or periodization. Just it's like, hey, this is on a Friday for a workout. We do like this is an example. I think that I don't know if they do it anymore, but Glenn Freshman Fun Day. Glenn, can you explain to everybody what Freshman Fun Day is?
Allegedly, I can neither confirm nor deny. But freshman fun day is just like where the freshmen, like the upperclassmen on the athletic team, would just have the freshmen do like silly little things. Like if it was raining, the field became a slip and slide, and all of the freshmen got to slip and slide in the like grassy knoll that was now flooded by the rain in between the two football fields, or various activities like that is essentially what it is. It's just a good bonding experience, is what I would call
Yeah,
it.
so
It's a great
like
sport.
what there is no training benefit from doing the slip and slide stuff. But every like it was on a Thursday, every time it rained, we had a coach, Andy Stanton, that'd be like, "All right, everybody, one rep of slip and slide," and just everybody would go do it. And the mental pickup for the small group of O linemen was a dramatic effect because everybody was fun and
Hmm.
they're like, Coach, we love this. We need to do this every time it rains. And it just becomes kind of like part of the culture is that the athletes love it. The coaches listen to the athletes. And it took us 30 seconds to a minute to do. So it wasn't taking away from general practice time. It was,
Right.
hey, we do this because it allows athletes to have more of autonomy in what's going on in a realm where they usually don't have. So that would be one of the outputs, and then back to the activity. The input for the coaches would be, are you providing time to do it? Are you talking to the athletes about like why we do what we do, like the X's and O's. There's a lot of times where athletes, even at the collegiate level, don't understand why certain things are being called. And so, like letting them, like, the Wizard of Oz, peel back the curtain, let
Hmm.
people see a little bit of what's happening behind the scenes. Number one, I think they would have a little more respect for what coaches do and the back-breaking hours that they put in developing training protocol and practices. And number two, it lets them know how the sausage is made. And
Hmm.
it's not pretty, but I think it's pretty necessary if you want buy-in, that people understand the good and the negative.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Sorry, I don't know if I really answered the
No,
logic
I think
model,
that
like
was
using
no,
stuff.
I think that was good. Um, kind of, I do want to circle back to kind of the idea of accountability and where you think coaches maybe kind of like bastardize that a little bit, and athletes, like the idea of like policing each other to enforce these standards, which I have my own opinions, but I'm curious as to like what your thoughts are on what accountability should look like versus what it does look like usually.
So what I think it usually looks like, it's a tool that people use to quasi-bully each other.
Yep.
And it's taken as a negative process when in actuality it should be looked at as a positive process and moments of growth. So it's all about like how are you like if you get in an argument with your significant other, do you bring that art like do you bring the issue to them in a calm, respectful way, or do you just like fly off the handle? You're like, this is what's wrong with what you did that I don't like, and so now I'm going to tell you things about you I don't like. I'm like, well, that you just set up a confrontation that can only lead to more negativity. So accountability is like the standard is the standard. If we're all pulling in the same direction for the standard, then we should be seeking opportunities when we see the standard not being met to mini coach other people how to meet it. And so that starts with like senior leadership. If you've had a group of I'm talking like maybe high school or college, if you've had a group of athletes for 3 to 4 years and you've preached and you've not just preached, but you've acted out these values and they see it and they believe in it and you've gotten the buy-in, then you may have a senior that sees when a freshman doesn't touch the line. That should not be an opportunity for the senior to go dog cuss the freshman and berate them and kind of use that as like a hazing, like exclusionary. It should be an opportunity like, let me explain to you why this matters.
Mm-hmm.
Is because 6 inches doesn't matter this second. But what about when it's 4th and 2 and we need that last 6 inches of effort from you and you haven't practiced the mindset of how to give more?
Mm-hmm.
When your body's tired, when your brain is exhausted, that's not when we do our best work. So we all revert to our base level of training. This is why the standard is that, because we want our base level of training to be so much higher than anybody else's that it's not an issue. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a thing that comes into play that impacts our season.
Versus more of like a shame-based negative approach.
There's just so much shame based, and don't
So
get me wrong,
much.
me and Glenn did that plenty.
So did I.
But we when we look back at it though, I think back about like how much more effective I could have been as an older player on the team, and how much better we could have been as a team, as a unit, had I taken the opportunities to, okay, a freshman doesn't know how to do something. Is it because they're stupid or they have not been taught?
Mm-hmm.
It's because they have not been taught the correct
Right.
way. So, and I think back and I would Hardin Simmons in 2007, we were 6-4. So I'm like, maybe we could have had a couple more wins. Now I know I'm talking about outcomes right now, like the wins,
Right.
but man, that just sticks in my craw. That 6-4. So, but like it can impact people's win-loss records. So if nothing else, if people are like, no, we're all about wins, you'll still do the right thing
Right.
to get the better win-loss record because it will make you more successful.
Yeah, that
Like
makes
you're going to
sense.
have better outcomes if you do the process better.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, no, without a doubt. And I think that's also important, when you look at kind of you were talking about short term, intermediate term, and long term outcomes. And with the long term outcome being producing a competent, professional human being, regardless of like what the athlete ends up going into when they leave your program. But when that's the end goal, that's that long term outcome you look for everyone, then the short term outcomes, the intermediate outcomes, the performance outcomes, all they don't take care of themselves, but it's a lot easier to achieve those outcomes, over time because the emphasis is on those values and then building from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the analogy of like the metric of a good person is if they will take the time after the grocery store, do they go put their trolley up? And but we stop there, but like, well, why don't we take it to the next step and like, well, there's somebody that has to go get those carts now. We're paying somebody as an organization to bring those back into the front and to line them all up. And so, like, yeah, it doesn't; those things don't immediately take care of themselves. But if the tide is rising, if everybody is doing their individual portion of taking their cart back, then you don't have somebody that has to go run down carts. It's better results through a better process.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It really kind of like one of the themes that I see that with each kind of component that you've talked about is that a lot of coaches and leaders will get about an inch deep or 6 inches deep on some of these things, but really like we need to get like 10, 15, 20 feet deep on a lot of these things in order to successfully implement them into practice. Is that accurate?
I would agree that and I don't think this is specific to coaches. I think this is specific to humanity.
Mm.
That we had, on our phones, we have more computing power in our phones than what put man on the moon. So I'm like, oh, we have a great and terrible power in our pocket,
Mm.
but we use it for snippets of information that we might not. So, like the Bloom's tax, are y'all familiar with Bloom's taxonomy? Like the knowing, understanding, analyzing, creating, evaluate. Like we. It's easy for people to know a thing,
Mm-hmm.
but have you invested the time to understand it
Mm.
or analyze it? And that takes repeated efforts over time. And I can see that it's not a sexy and it's not a fun process. Like it's not fun to lose weight. It's fun getting fat. Like going to Golden Corral and going straight to the prime rib. You see Glenn wander over to the chocolate fountain. You're like, that's my boy right there. Love it. Get it, Glenn. But like it's easy to get fat, but it's hard to lose weight because it requires like you got to pay attention to stuff. You can't eat. My weakness, I love cherry Pop Tarts. When I'm trying to lose weight, I'm like, if I have them in the house, I'm gonna eat them. If I don't pay attention to the calories and the training, and there's things out of whack. So if we're working towards people becoming more invested in this, understand it takes time, and it's okay to make mistakes along the way. Like we aren't our worst failure. We're always people becoming. So every coach should think like I'm never coach finished. I'm a coach becoming. I'm
Mm.
becoming who I'm going to be tomorrow. And if I don't take time to intentionally engage, especially like the competency, the autonomy, and the relatedness, and not only trying those things out, but putting your head in books and reading, the smartest people read for fun.
Mm-hmm.
The smartest people I've met is that they've always got a book in their hand. And I'm not, it doesn't have to be that everybody's reading Simon Sinek, just reading, being a more well-rounded individual about how can we introduce concepts and ideas to people that may be hesitant to receive them.
Mm. Yeah, that's huge.
I like that.
Is there anything that you want to add to kind of like what you've gone through already that you think would be important for coaches and leaders and athletes to take away from this?
And there's so much. I could just like talk for 45 minutes of like what they need, what they needed. But I think the first step is the desire to get better, to do things better is the first step. And as long as they are stepping onto that track to run that race, you're lapping everybody that's not doing it. And so you're going to make mistakes. So before I was a professor, I was a coach, and I cringe at the way that I used to coach. The things that I would do, I'm like, oh gosh, I just didn't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
But in my mind, I knew I was like, oh, okay, but that's not who I am today. This is a lot of growth that's happened because I have failed. We learn more through failure than we do success. So don't be afraid to try something. If it works, great. Institutionalize it. If it
Mm.
doesn't work, well, you found something that doesn't work. So you know that you can put it aside and rethink it later. So just getting a foot in the race is the first step. And you'll be better at it, like squatting. You start squatting today, you'll be a better squatter in a year. In 5 years, you're going to be even better. In 10 years, you're going to be even better than that. So just encouraging coaches like run the race.
Yeah, no,
I,
that's great.
I mentioned that when I spoke last month at the NSCA conference. I talked about as a coach, like you preach growth mindset, but do you have one? And then especially for strength and conditioning coaches, like us lifting weights is not practicing a growth mindset
Mm-mm.
because it's something that we like to do and it's not that hard for us. So that's always like a fun one to throw out there from my point of view.
Yeah.
Okay, let me do this because we have, like you guys said, all kinds of good stuff. I'm going to throw out some examples from our sheet. And then so Tim and Jordan, I'm going to read off like 3 to 4. And if you have anything like specifically that comes to mind, where you're like, I did this and it was easy to implement, or I've seen someone do this in their program and it was successful, just like feel free to like elaborate, talk about it, whatever. Yeah, you're in the right spot. I see you in there. And then we'll just go down and we'll cover inputs, activities, all that kind of stuff. And that kind of give us a little bit of everyone's heard all of our amazing, like all the stuff, and they're like, how do I actually do that in my program? So this is what this is about. Sound good?
Yep.
Okay. I feel like I'm a little echoey, but that's why Tim's the chief editor, because he can deal with these issues.
Thanks, AI.
Inputs are the resources and supports a coach needs to build a SDT based environment. Coach education, observation or mentoring from autonomy supportive coaches, time for goal setting meetings with athletes to develop competency, feedback systems that include athletes' perspectives, and then last but not least, support from athletic directors to prioritize athlete well being over results. Any thoughts? Get after it.
What comes to mind when one of the early things you said in those statements is finding a mentor. I
Mm-hmm.
think that a lot of times coaches think when they get a full-time position that they're done growing. So we talked about that growth mindset. It's like, no, there's always somebody that knows more than you. And so like I'm 41 and a full professor. I have somebody on my campus who I consider a mentor, and I probably pester them more than that they would want to be bothered because I really respect and love what their thought process is because it challenges my own because they've been doing it for so much long, not just doing it. They don't have they don't just have 30 years of experience one time. Like if you just redo it, you have 30 years of 1 year of experience. But the person that I have as a mentor, that this is a person who has continued to grow and continued to get better over time. And I look to them as a person that I would want my career to mimic theirs. And so I get in their ear and I ask them questions. I'm like, hey, how would you handle this issue? Like, even as easy as let's so now I'm a full professor, full tenured. I'm really interested on student retention. And so I know a person over in the freshman college at ASU who is a retention expert. And so they're someone I've identified, they're my mentor and I've chosen them. They have allowed me to do this as well. So that would be the thing that stuck out to me the most is the need to find mentorship. And mentorship is not from afar. Mentorship is not reading Simon Sinek or Patrick Lencioni. Those are good things to do. Read those items. But if you're not talking with another person about what this means for the organization or what are the implications of it, then you're at this alone and you're more apt to make worse mistakes.
Yeah, we've talked about mentorship at least two or three times, pretty I think in every episode so far, as something that obviously we are extremely in favor of, but in the sense of like if you try to reflect on a training session, a practice, a season on your own, the likelihood that you even know what your blind spots are, things that you missed, is super, super high. And if you have a mentor who can then act as a mirror and actively reflect back what they've seen or what they've observed and then filter it through the lens of their experience, then they give you really, really valuable feedback.
100%. Like we don't know what we don't know,
Exactly, right.
and that we don't know that we don't know it.
Yeah,
So it's like levels of blindness.
yeah,
I'm like, we're not even aware of our own incompetency
right.
sometimes
Yeah,
until somebody puts an arm around us. I'm like, hey, let me explain this a little better to you so you can be a little happier in life.
right, yeah. And it's also like we're generally going to lean like into our biases no matter who we are.
Right? Yeah, that's like personality predates ideology.
Yeah,
So like
absolutely.
we have a certain belief system that we have constructed based off of our personality, and then we find things that match that, and then we follow into the ideology that matches that the most.
Hmm. That's interesting.
Okay, I like that. That was a bar. Okay, next one. Activities, specific behaviors or strategies that coaches can implement. Supporting autonomy, could look like. And you guys feel free to elaborate if any of these strike a chord with you or you've done them. Giving athletes choices in the drills they do, encouraging their input during strategy sessions, explaining the why behind the training tasks, building their competence, setting achievable skill goals, providing positive and specific feedback, creating progression based training plans, and then fostering relatedness, showing empathy, celebrating team and individual accomplishments, and building trust through open communication. Tim had
I
one in his newsletter
go
that
ahead. Sorry.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
saying Tim had one in his newsletter that I liked about letting athletes choose the music in the weight room, and eventually you'll get used to like the big booty mix, which has got some bangers on it.
It's nothing but bangers. But go
But
ahead,
yeah,
Jordan. I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Oh, I was just going to say, as long as Outcast with Bombs Over Baghdad is on it, we're solid. That
There you
is
go.
no. So I was thinking more about the supporting autonomy. I think it's really difficult to support autonomy in a field, especially for me teaching. I am dictating the class to people, and so how do I give opportunities for autonomy for the film like they've got skin in the game? And I'll use this example because we did it last week. So in my sports psychology class, I cleared a week off our schedule. I'm like, guys, we're only going to work on applied self-determination theory. And I gave them really bare bones instructions because I wanted them to breathe life into it. Of like, in a perfect world, I hire you to help teach sports psychology next semester. I want you to create an assignment that benefits one or two aspects of self-determination theory for for the students in the class. And so they not only had to think about, well, like, okay, what does it mean to do self-determination theory? But then, okay, so you understand it. Now you have to figure out how do you apply it with an assessment, and then how do you give that assessment? And so they had to create an assignment. And I tell them, so this is part of like how I also foster relatedness in that class is give them autonomy to create it. And like the best one, or if there are a lot of good ones, I say, I'm going to put this into my next iteration of the class. Like I'm going to use your input on how to make my class better from what students' perspective is. Because what I like is and what I think works may not always work with with younger people. So I'm 41. My cultural references stopped hitting when I was 30.
Right.
I'm like, I would make a Friends reference, or and they're like, Friends. Oh yeah, my mom used to watch that. And I just get really sad, dejected, and I'm like, your mom sounds pretty awesome, but
Yeah.
she's my age. So when we're the supporting autonomy and also that relatedness, and so that's my example of how I do it in a classroom because when you give them opportunity to be creative, you find that a lot of times people haven't been given that freedom, so they don't know what to do with it. But you let them sit with it, and they have to think their way through problems. Like the problem is the problem, thinking is the solution. If we don't give people time and opportunity to think through problems, then what are we doing? Like we
Mm.
want more critical thinking populace. Are we providing opportunities for people to get reps at that?
Yeah, it's huge. I think for me, like, you know, in terms of supporting autonomy, one thing that I've always tried to do, not always, but in the last, probably 8 to 10 years is really simple. Like give athletes a menu of exercises. Hey, we're doing a squat pattern today. Like pick your squat pattern. What do you want to do today? What feels most comfortable? Obviously, to a point, if you're working with a developmental athlete, freshman in high school, it's probably not something that you're going to do. But at the same time, like within reason, like you can give them opportunities to develop autonomy, um, and then including them obviously in the planning process. Like we did that when I was a sport coach. We would let our guys use pick what words, like what terminology we wanted to use when doing audibles or running things in from the sideline, like really really simple stuff. Because then they use words that resonate with them. We don't use words that resonate with us because they're the ones who really matter in that equation. Um, and as far as like competence, anything that's technical skill based or movement skill based, obviously just having a progression and then take like walking athletes through that progression is going to improve their competence in those areas. And then the same thing, like the example that we talked about earlier in terms of like using positive reinforcement to develop mental competence commensurately with those physical competencies. Um, and then on the relatedness side, like one of the biggest things, probably one of my favorite things I've ever done, is when I was at the college level, volleyball was my primary sport, and so I would see him 3 times a week, and I saw him 3 times a week for 8 years. And there was a bar around the corner from our campus. Every Wednesday night, they would have Wine Wednesday. So, and we would train on Wednesday mornings. And once I found out about Wine Wednesday and how popular it was, I started saying, okay, you know what? Today is Wine Wednesday, WHINE. So we're going to take the first 5 minutes of the training session, and we're going to go around the room. Everyone, you're going to complain about one thing. It can be relative to me, the program, the sport, the athletic department. It doesn't matter. It can be complaining about your parents, and it was amazing how quickly that took off. So I had a theme day basically for every day of the week. Monday was my favorite Monday, where you pick it could be anything. Favorite flavor of ice cream, which doesn't, again, the topic didn't matter. What mattered is that it got the kids to share about themselves in a way that they probably wouldn't do otherwise, or they would just kind of like gloss over. And because it's a captive audience, I was kind of taking advantage of that, to be honest with you. But like throughout the week, and then throughout what it could be an off season or whatever, they learned so much more about each other, which then obviously is a big relatedness component there. And then periodically, like I intentionally left Friday like unaccounted for, with the exception of maybe like once a month, and that was family time Friday. And that's when like they got to learn about me, and they got to learn about, you talking about like self-disclosure. They got to learn about a lot of my like mental health challenges. They got to learn about my experiences, like coach athlete relationships, and kind of like things that I dealt with in college that hopefully then they could take things away from, but that also built that bi-directional relationship and relatedness between us. So, and that was always really special for them, because how often are they going to be in an environment with a coach who is actually open about their life and their experiences.
Tim, I absolutely love everything you just said. And I want to point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but some subtext that I hear from you is that it doesn't seem like your ego is ever a component in this entire process. Like it's about other people, not self. And I think that that is incredibly, number one, really, really good for coaches to like death of ego. But I'm like, it's harder. Like all these things that you're telling us that you do, it's like you're taking more time to develop these thought processes, and more than just like, you know what, here's the practice plan, let's get to it. You're taking time to pre-plan, and when it would be so much easier, just like, nope, we're going to get to work.
Mm-hmm.
So I really do appreciate hearing that. It's always fun when you meet coaches, because in general, most coaches have a healthy ego. And so when
Yeah.
you meet somebody, a coach that's like, I don't have an ego, I just have who I am and how I'm going to be, it's really refreshing.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I definitely have my fair share of an ego. But in those environments, like I did try to use every opportunity I could to facilitate especially the connectedness between them.
Nice. That was cool. I like that. You guys both said some good stuff. Okay, last two are kind of intertwined, but they're a little bit interdependent. So I want y'all to share an experience or maybe a story where you experienced this. And Jordan, I was thinking about like you specifically because you do your coaching in a classroom, and then previously you did it administrating at a summer camp, right? So it's kind of a
Yeah.
different environment, but there was very much still coaching. Real quick though, Tim, to your point about Family Friday, where they got to learn about you, I do some one-on-one corporate coaching, and I always send notes to the people's bosses that I work with. And I had a client, he hired me. He's like, I can't relate to my people at all. I don't know what's going on. And eventually we figured out it's because he always had his professional facade on. And so we started having these conversations. And I asked one of his attorneys, I was like, what was the highlight of your week? And she was like, oh, I actually had a personal conversation with Brad. And I got to know a little bit about him as a person. And I just highlighted that and sent it to him in like size 48 font. And I was like, we found the problem, bud. People don't know you because you
Yeah.
never take off your professional facade. And so that was when you said that, that's what it made me think of. But so there's an important thing to like being humanizing yourself and finding an appropriate level of like vulnerability and sharing what's happening in your life. So number three is outputs. Outputs are the immediate or acute observable results of the coach's actions. This could look like increased athlete participation in decision making, more positive athlete feedback, or documented use of autonomy supported strategies. And then outcomes, and if you guys have I know we've kind of used different words for this one, but this one is outcomes represent the changes in athlete motivation, mindset, and performance that result from the coach's actions. So when I hear output, I think an acute change, and when I hear outcome, I think of like a chronic change or a chronic result from the things that you guys have been implementing. So, do y'all have any kind of like stories, examples, ways you could illustrate an output and outcome, or maybe both, and how they played into each other? And you can think as long as you want to, because we can edit, so it's perfect.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to think about it like maybe pulling from a story from when I was a camp director for the Boy Scouts of America. I ran a camp down by Wimberley. We would have 400 kids a week, and we had 80 head of horse, so we ran trail rides all across. So I'm trying to think. Okay, so I had a climbing director who, have y'all ever met people that have really just fallen in love with their own title and that they
This guy.
Tim
this
just
guy,
pointed at himself.
what's
President
what's
of
what's
Maverick.
got two thumbs, handsome, and does that? Tim Kettenring. Yeah. So so we had a rule. So there were cliche roads, and so like on cliche roads, what the hill country, you can't go faster than 20 25 miles an hour just because it kicks up so much dirt, and everything looks like it's dust, and so this is awful. It makes people cough, and so we have signs posted like speed limit. And so we're out there by Wimberley, and he was going into town to San Marcos to get something to eat, just for he was off for that. Well, he drove. So that we were having a night where like the adults, like the parents of the kids, come to camp, and we have like a burger burn. We're down by the river. We make burgers, and we're just all hanging out, doing programming, and letting the adults see what the kids have been doing all week. As people are coming into camp, he whips around and chases somebody going, he's going about 55, 70, and cuts them off on a cliche road, and like drives them off the road, gets in front of them, and is like yelling at them. And then I get a phone call from somebody else who came, like one of my other staffers, and they're like, front gate now. And then they used our code word. I'm like, that's an emergency. And so I roll up on this, and I have a staff member who is berating a CEO of an oil company because it's the Houston area Boy Scout Council. And so I'm like, man, I don't think you understand just how many problems you're going to cause for our organization and our camp. This guy is connected and he's wealthy. We are nobodies. Who are they going to keep around? So for the outputs, I had to think like, what is the thing that I wanted to happen immediately? Like, what is the thing? And the only thing I could think of is that I need to de-escalate this. And so I turned to my staffer. I'll just name him Josh. That's not his real name. I said, "Hey, Josh, can you go head back to headquarters for me and grab a Coke, and then we'll go talk in my office." And then like I had to get him away because he was in that fight or flight response, and he was definitely about that fight. Then to the parents, I'm like, "Hey, here's the situation. I apologize. That's not how I want my staff to treat parents." And so I escorted them down to the facility where they were supposed to be at, and I gave them a like a $20 gift card to our store. I'm like, this is all I got on me. I'm so sorry. I'm comping your meals for the night. I'm trying to make smooth things over. So the outcome. or the output was that immediacy, but I still had the problem. The
Mm-hmm.
problem existed that he thought that that was an okay thing. And so I always try to look at in the process of whatever happened, what was my role in it going poorly? Like what could I have done better? And so for that is like, well, had I had a talk with that specific climbing director who just teaches kids to climb about how we enforce rules across our entire campus. And so I had to sit down and like, hey, this is like I want you to have ownership of this, but you don't own it. You don't own camp. And so I sat down with him, and over the next week, we developed a set of policies in conjunction with other staff members of like rules of engagement when we talk to adults on our property.
Mm.
Because there's a like if the parents don't send the kids to our camp, we don't have a job. So maybe we should figure out how to work best with that. So that the outputs was the immediate, and then the outcomes is like eventually I got more buy-in because the staff got to say, hey, this is what I think should be a part of our policy. And it made the staff like more cohesive because they debated things. And it
Mm.
was really intense to see because I did not expect them to go that route with it. So I was, yeah, that was my example.
Yeah, that's. I would not want to be in that situation. I would
Oh, he
definitely,
very,
definitely
very
not do well.
powerful.
Yeah.
No, I did get a phone call from the chief executive, and he was very kind about it, but he's like, "You got to get a handle on your staff." And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Understood."
Yes, sir.
He told me how much that man was worth and how much he gives to our organization, and I was like, "He's given more this year than I will make in a lifetime."
Yeah.
So, no, rule number one: don't screw with the money people.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep them happy. That's why. That's why I keep Glenn around,
He's also handsome to look at.
So stupid.
without a doubt. So what as you were kind of talking through that, one thing that I guess crystallized for me was that a series of outputs lead to outcomes, essentially. So I mean that's from a like from an S&C standpoint, like that's why testing consistently is important. That's why using technology responsibly is important because ultimately like it's going to lead to better outcomes.
It's like the Papa John's better ingredients makes better pizza. I feel like Jordan's told me that before. It's a good like.
Or that you have seen an ad. I'm not always associated with food.
Yeah, I can feel the GI distress like already happening inside me after as much food as you guys have talked about so far.
Just from speaking about it, Tim's getting
Yeah,
Really,
crazy.
Tim, you
digestion
are a
not great.
tourist in Fat Body Land. We are permanent residents.
Would
It's
never
it's
survive unlimited pasta bowl at Hogfest. We'll just say that.
It was
yes, and
14 bowls that the person who won that contest. So that's pretty impressive. 14 bowls of the never-ending pasta at Olive Garden.
can't even fathom that.
Which
Don't
is
don't tell me athletes can't do hard things.
Yeah, that's a hard thing.
the hardest thing would have been to not eat 14 bowls, probably.
Probably a little more willpower involved, but you know, you win some, you lose some.
Did just the McRib is back, which I'm pretty excited about. The McRib is my like Achilles heel. I have to have one. It's what I love.
I
People are
can't
like,
McRib
even
season.
wrap my
like,
head around that.
they're like, there's yoga mats in McRib, and I'm like, I don't care, you know?
We're already full of microplastics. It's not
Yeah, it's totally
all
fine.
right. From playing football in the 2000s, I know CTE is coming for me. So like, I'm not going to be here. I'm here for a good time, not a long time.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I'm gonna be the first living CTE patient.
Crazy and
Although
wild
not for long after diagnosis, I'm sure.
rails.
It's a real major digression.
So I'm gonna task Jordan with this to kind of close us out. So everything we talked about, it was a good, solid 1 hour deep dive. If someone were to come up to you and be like, "Hey, man, I heard you talk about like this theory, and it was great, but it was hard for me to conceptualize. how would you give it to them in the most bite size as possible? And we just talked about how a lot of times you do a disservice to hard things by making them too digestible and too easy because they lose some of their potency. But I guess like, hey, one thing you want anyone that works with people or organizations or coaches in any facet to walk away from, to take with them from the conversation we just had.
Yeah, so I know that this has mostly been around how to use logic models for self-determination theory, but I'll talk in a practical sense of like if they're not understanding how to do it, I would explain more like the importance of why to do it, and that is because that if we show a logic model in our programming about our resources, our other inputs, and what we're doing with the money that we're provided, and what our like proximal, distal, and out long-term outcomes are, that we're showing the return on investment that people are making into our organization and what they can expect from it, rather than we just say we're going to get we do X. We're showing how we do X. And that logic model is just a visual representation. So if you just Google logic model, you can see like I think it works better in a visual formatting because it's a visual tool that we can see how people can track and use the things at their disposal to get the outcomes that like the distal outcomes, the long-term outcomes that they're wanting, rather than it just be, well, we're just trying to do this and we're just doing the God's honest work. Well, no, we can add a little more logic and a little more
Mm-hmm.
planning to this because we have big goals, but our big goals, like I think Tim, you said it earlier, like the all these small things they build up into the big things. And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
explaining to somebody how when we do the little things right, we build that critical mass that needs it to get our culture moving in the right direction.
Mm.
Nice. Okay. Do you want, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to hit you up? Share whatever you want to. Pitch your latest book you have coming out. Any and all above things.
Well, my most recent book is Golden Corral, Heaven or Hell. No, sorry, that is
That's your
Golden Corral.
biography, is that?
That's it's just a picture of me just sitting in Golden Corral, having to unbutton the pants because I've gone too hard, but never salad. That's not what you're there for. So I would no, I'd say hit me up on any social media that you can find me on Instagram at Professor Nerdo, or email me Angelo jordan.daniel@angelo.edu. And I am always willing to work with people, and like I'm all about education. So any way that I can help people become more educated or help educate others, I'm all about. So let me know how I can best help you by first reaching out through those mediums, and we'll work from there.
Yeah, and we'll add all those links and email address to the show notes.
Also, feel free to the document that I sent y'all. If y'all want to post that in the notes, I would not bother me at all. Would love it.
Yeah, easy enough. We can do that.
Cool. Excellent. Well, yes. Thank you, Jordan. We appreciate it. Tim is in North Carolina right now, so he's on his annual. I'm going to call it like deep work productivity retreat. I don't know if
Company
that
retreat.
company retreat and pres.
I'm a
Speaking of being in
sole
love
sole
with
proprietor
titles,
taking a company retreat.
president, dude, it's a tax write-off. So
Yeah,
that'll be our next episode. Actually, no, we are going to talk a little bit
tax
about
evasion.
not tax evasion. Okay, we're going to talk about if you are a coach, a solopreneur, someone, and you want to figure out like how do I price my services and value myself. We're going to detail a little bit about how Tim and I go through that and determine what our worth is and how we do that with various clients and people that we work with. So y'all stay tuned for that. But with that being said, this is the Gray Matters podcast because life happens between the binary. Thank you so much for joining us, y'all. Like, follow,